Hi there. Welcome to another Richmond School District Numeracy video. This video focuses on the high yield routine, alike and different. My name is Janice Nowakowski, and I am a district teacher consultant supporting teachers from kindergarten through grade 12 in the areas of mathematics and numeracy. The routine I'm going to share with you today is alike and different, and it was introduced in the book High Yield Routines, published by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Essentially, for this routine, you present a set of 2 or more items. It could be a visual or a photograph of the items, or it could be the actual 3-dimensional items. Those items are presented to students, and students are asked to consider, discuss, and share the similarities and differences between the items. Here's an example drawn from that book. This is in a grade 8 class at Steveston, London, where they were presented with 2 numbers, 33% and 1/3. And they were asked to work together and collaborate, either using large vertical whiteboards or smaller whiteboards or paper, and choose a format on their own that they thought would help them think about these 2 numbers and compare their similarities and differences. And you can see here some children, students in grade 8 have chosen a Venn diagram with each separate number and what their characteristics are, and then what characteristics are the same in the middle. Some of them have used columns or charts and different colors of markers to share their thinking. In a grade 5 class at Westwind Elementary, a teacher used the alike and different routine that they had done throughout the year as a form of formative assessment to get sort of a check-in to see how students were understanding these 2 concepts. So they began by defining or showing a visual image to explain what perimeter was and what area was, and then looking at those 2 concepts and looking for similarities and differences. And they could record in a Venn diagram or turn the paper over and show that in a different way. Whoops. The big thinking process involved in this particular routine is comparative thinking. And comparative thinking is really one of those really important instructional strategies that lends to deeper thinking as well as connecting ideas. So connecting learning and supports student achievement across all areas of learning. As with many of these routines, educators have generated resources for their fellow educators on websites. And so one website that you might want to look at is called samebutdifferentmath.com. And this is just a screenshot of the table of contents of that website. So you can see that the images are put into different categories: early numeracy, multiplication, division, geometry, algebra, etc. So this is really a routine that can be used across the grades from pre-K all the way into secondary school. When you click on that category, there then is a collection of images either created by the educator that curates this website or that other educators have sent into them. So here are some examples from the website. Sorry, my slides are doing some funny things today. Here are 2 from the early numeracy category. So on the top left, you see you would present those 2 images. You could print them off for table groups of students to look at, or you could project them onto your screen in your classroom. So there's 2 5 frames. They have the same quantity, but they're different orientations. So again, this routine really lends itself to explaining students' thinking, having them communicate, and a focus on precise mathematical language and vocabulary. They might use gestures or their fingers to show those different orientations. So 2 and 2, 4 altogether, etc. And other ways that they could think about making 4, or thinking about 4 in relation to 5. So that first one, is really about composing and decomposing quantities to 5. So 4 and 1, 2 and 1 and 2, etc. On the right, you see a similar image, but with unifix cubes. They're the same or similar because they both have 6 cubes and they both have 2 colors, but they're in different orientations and there's different amounts. So again, what do students notice? What can they say about those? And then here's two geometry examples for grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, where we're really focusing on those attributes or characteristics of three-dimensional objects, a cone and a square-based pyramid. And, how do we describe those? How are they similar? How are they different? Bringing out all that math language. And again, these routines are meant as a 5 to 10 minute introduction to your lesson, to, sort of generate some of that language and thinking that you want to carry over into the body of your lesson. On the bottom right, you see two triangles. Grade 6 content curriculum focuses on the classification and identification of different triangles. So this would be, an ideal one to put up and talk about those concepts of similarity and congruency, right angles, different types of angles, and the different names for different types of triangles. For grade 6 and 7 and into grade 8, there are learning standards around fractions, decimals, ratios, and percentages, and looking at different representations of those, concrete, visual, and symbolic. And so these are just 5 different same but different pairings that I took from the Same But Different Math website. And you can see, again, they might represent the same amount, but their form is different. And so having students, again, make connections between those different forms as they compare similarities and differences. And again, for grade 8 and grade 9, looking at single variable algebraic equations. And again, for many of these, students need to do a little bit of the math to help them think about this. So presenting 2 equations and having students discuss how they're alike and how they're different. And then it's fun to create your own alike and different images. And again, you could use concrete objects on tables for students to look at. You can take pictures of these and then share them on, through a projector through your laptop. So I used some dominoes that I had, and I intentionally did them in this orientation to think about, nudge that thinking around fractions. So students could think about these across the grades. Younger students might count up all the dots and see what the total is for each domino and talk about how they're alike and different. Ideas around even and odd numbers and subitizing comes up, and different orientations of the dots. Using a material like sum blocks. And again, sum blocks are proportional blocks like Cuisenaire rods. So the 5 and the 5, when stacked together, are the same height as the 10 block, as are the composition of 4 and 4 and 2. It's the same height as 5 and 5. So we've got, big math ideas here around equivalency and balance and composing and decomposing numbers in different ways. This is another math material called Numeracy shapes. And again, here I've composed, 2 sets of 8, but they're using different shapes and different quantities to represent that amount. And then using some 3-dimensional shapes that I had here in the Math Studio, and thinking about what are their similarities and differences. In this case, if these were on tables for students, they could pick them up and turn them around and look at them from different perspectives, which might provide some more language for them to talk about those 3-dimensional objects. Oops, we skipped over the cards. Using decks of cards, again, for those of you teaching 6, 7, and 8, you can use black and red as positive and negative. You could combine more than 1 cards to create 2 and 3-digit numbers. Students can talk about color, they can talk about suit, and they can talk about quantity. So lots of different things they can compare. And then using numerals that you may have in your classroom to create numbers. You could add a little point for the decimal point and create different numbers that students could compare. Shapes, this is just from a tangram puzzle I had. And again, changing the orientation slightly, even though that they're similar triangles, but different sizes, just creates this opportunity to add some different mathematical language into the discussion. So being really intentional about, again, what you choose and how you place it will get different language and discussions coming up. Again, shapes that have some similarities, they're different colors. So again, for some students, that may be what they notice right away. And that provides an access point for most students to engage with this. These both have straight sides. There is a right angle in both, at least one right angle in both, but then, there's some differences as well. And then these were some shape compositions that I just created on a PowerPoint slide as part of a lesson, but as a way, again, to talk about orientation and bring up some of that spatial reasoning language as they compare similarities and differences. And this is just an example of a lesson flow, how you might use this instructional routine as your opening. So again, putting up a slide with some alike and different images. In this case, it was different orientations for 3 squares. And then that might lead into an investigation where you put out square tiles or cubes and have students come up with all the different ways, shapes that they can compose using first 4 squares or cubes and then 5 squares or cubes. And notice if they seeing any patterns in the quantity of different orientations they can come up with. They might start a T-chart for those of you that teach grade 3, 4, 5 or above, and look for some algebraic connections there. And then the closing of that lesson, again, is bringing students back together to really connect their learning and consolidate their thinking about this particular area of mathematics. And that's really a key part of any lesson that we do in mathematics. So one of the other reasons we do these routines, besides engagement and connections to the curriculum, is the development on the left-hand side of, you can see the curricular competencies that are developed in just this one routine. And so when you do this routine over and over and over regularly over your school year, you know that you're developing and nurturing these curricular competencies in your student. You're building a math community, you're building mathematical discourse and language. And on the right side, also building mathematical content knowledge as well, depending on what particular images you put up. Some other connections to this routine, here are some alike and different picture books that you might be able to find on the left-hand side. These are not math specific. There's lots of connections to science and the world around us. And you might use this again to elicit that comparative thinking that we want to develop across all curricular areas. On the right-hand side, we do see a math-specific picture book, Which One Doesn't Belong, which many people are familiar with. And that uses, in this book, there's 4 pictures of geometric shapes and really focuses on those characteristics and attributes of geometric shapes. Uses comparative thinking, but uses 4 shapes and talking about how they're the same, but also which one is maybe the most unique, which one doesn't belong. And many of you are familiar with that instructional routine. Taking alike and different outdoors. These are 2 botanical samples from my backyard. So a cedar, a bit of a cedar branch, and then from another evergreen bush that we have. And, having students think about what mathematics they can bring to talking about how these are alike and different. Shape and size and symmetry, those big mathematical ideas to bring to that discussion. So as we close this video today, I want you to think about how you will use this high yield instructional routine with your students. And thank you for joining me today.